The room hangs suspended 40 floors above the city streets, a glass-bound capsule filled with a temperature-controlled chill that leaves a faint metallic taste on the back of our tongues. Outside the massive panoramic windows, the twilight of the metropolis expands in an intricate mathematical grid of white and ruby lights, a sprawling circuit board of human motion pulsing through the gathering dark. The sky above the skyscraper peaks is no longer blue, nor is it yet black. It has bruised into a deep synthetic violet, washed out by the millions of lumens radiating from digital billboards, office complexes, and the endless stream of vehicles crawling along the arterial expressways below. Inside our workspace, the illumination is flat and unyielding. The overhead neon fixtures cast a sterile, shadowless glare across the polished white desks, reflecting off the brushed aluminum casing of our laptops and the sleek glass surfaces of our tablets. On our digital dashboards, graphs and spreadsheets glow with a cold luminescence, their lines charting productivity life cycles, quarterly financial metrics, and the relentless upward slope of our projected growth. We sit surrounded by the apex of modern design, inside a building specifically engineered to insulate us from the chaotic variables of nature, yet a strange, unacknowledged coldness has settled deep within our bones. If we drop our awareness beneath the rapid surface chatter of our intellect and observe our collective physical container in this very moment, we can detect a silent, systemic holding pattern that has become our second nature. We are sitting with our gluteal muscles tightly clenched against the expensive fabric of our ergonomic chairs. Our thighs braced as if we are preparing to stand up at a moment's notice to defend ourselves against an unseen intruder. The arches of our feet are contracted inside our leather shoes, curled slightly upward, disconnected from the deep gravity of the earth that sits buried beneath 40 layers of steel and concrete. If we bring our hand to our chest, we can feel the rigid, defensive quality of our rib cage. Our sternum is pulled tight, locked into a subtle, permanent state of brace that restricts the natural, lateral expansion of the lungs. We are holding our breath, not with the expansive peace of a deep meditation, but in a shallow, suspended inhalation that hovers precariously around the collarbones. It is the breath of a soldier waiting for the signal to advance, the breath of an organism that feels it is constantly navigating an inhospitable, high-stakes wilderness where any moment of genuine relaxation could prove fatal. We have become master architects of a magnificent, ever-receding mirage. We move through our days under the absolute, unquestioned conviction that our current existence is merely a transactional terrain, a harsh and demanding landscape that we must endure, manage, and conquer. We tell ourselves a consistent, persuasive narrative. This current exhaustion, this flattening of our sensory joy, this chronic tension in our bodies is the necessary price we must pay to purchase a future sanctuary of permanent safety. We live in a psychological waiting room of our own construction, staring at a closed door, holding a ticket, and waiting for a final, distant permission slip to arrive. We believe that once we reach a specific financial milestone, once we acquire that particular piece of real estate, once we secure that coveted title, or once our investments cross a certain threshold of mathematical certainty, we will finally earn the right to belong. We will finally grant ourselves the authority to lower our guard, to soften our bellies, to unlock our jaws, and to take one complete, unhurried breath that travels all the way down into the depths of our pelvic basin. This collective habit of psychological postponement creates a profound, painful alienation within our daily lives. We find ourselves living our lives in the conditional tense, treating the immediate present as a disposable piece of friction that must be outrun to reach the prize. When we walk through the city park, we do not smell the damp earth or the scent of pine needles cooking. In the afternoon heat, we are busy calculating our net worth or running a mental simulation of a high-pressure contract negotiation. When we sit at a dinner table with the people who love us, their words reach our ears as distant, muffled sounds, like a radio playing in another room. Our eyes look at them, but our minds are silently editing an internal spreadsheet, reviewing a checklist of tasks, or worrying about a potential market shift that might disrupt our 5-year trajectory. The living, breathing human being sitting across from us is reduced to a blurred silhouette, an interruption to the urgent, unseen labor of building our future fortress. We are physically here, but our life force has migrated into a hypothetical tomorrow, leaving our bodies behind to operate like highly efficient, burnt-out automatons. Let us look honestly at the profound anxiety that drives this perpetual flight from the current moment. Why does the simplicity of right now feel so terrifying to us? Why does an unstructured afternoon or an hour of absolute silence feel like an existential threat to the modern mind? When the noise of our striving and planning drops away for a few seconds, we are often confronted with a raw, vibrating sense of worthlessness. We have been deeply conditioned by a culture that equates our human value with our material output, a society that views rest as a symptom of weakness and contentment as a form of economic stagnation. We have internalized the voice of the market, turning it into our own inner tyrant. This inner voice whispers that we are never quite enough as we are, that our current security is a fragile illusion that could be shattered at any moment, and that if we stop running, if we stop optimizing, if we stop expanding our perimeters, we will fall behind and be forgotten by the world. And so we continue to add layers of concrete to our psychological pavement, believing that if we can just make the surface hard enough, flat enough, and permanent enough, our anxiety will finally cease. This fragmentation of our awareness is not an individual flaw, it is the collective climate we inhabit. We live in an environment that monetizes our restlessness, an economic ecosystem that thrives on our perpetual dissatisfaction. The digital screens that dominate our landscapes are deliberately designed to keep our attention pulled outward, away from the warm, dense reality of our internal organs and into a thin, hyperstimulated matrix of information, comparison, and consumption. We are constantly fed the myth of the optimized life, told that we can engineer our way out of our human vulnerability through the right combination of wealth, wellness routines, and professional achievements. We treat our own lives as a high-stakes business enterprise that we must constantly audit, review, and upgrade. We become hyper-connected to the global grid of information, yet we are completely illiterate when it comes to the language of our own biology. We can track the fluctuations of a stock market on the other side of the planet with a single glance at our wrists, but we are completely blind to the silent, suffocating cry of our own nervous systems. Consider the immense biological cost of this way of existing. The human body does not understand the difference between a physical threat to its survival and a psychological threat created by a simulated failure within our thoughts. When we sit at our desks and obsessively worry about whether we will hit our financial metrics 3 years from now, our brain triggers the exact same evolutionary survival mechanisms that it would if we were facing a mortal danger. The adrenal glands flood our bloodstream with cortisol and adrenaline, the heart rate accelerates, the blood vessels constrict to protect our extremities, and the digestive and immune systems are deprioritized. We are running an internal marathon of survival while sitting completely motionless under neon lights. Day after day, our organs are bathed in this invisible, chemical bath of stress. We wonder why our shoulders feel like blocks of frozen granite, why our lower backs ache with a deep, heavy resentment, and why we wake up at dawn with a sudden, unprovoked knot of dread sitting in the center of our stomachs. It is because our flesh is exhausted from carrying the weight of a palace that has not yet been built. We have forgotten the radical, ancient truth that our true nature is not that of an architect, trying to construct an unassailable fortress, shifting world, but that of an open, spacious sky that simply hosts whatever weather passes through it. We are so consumed with painting our desires, our fears, and our rigid conditions onto this sky that we have lost sight of the vast, pristine blue that lies immediately behind our mental clouds. We have traded the birthright of our inherent freedom for the heavy, suffocating chains of a conditional worth. We would rather live in the cramped, predictable prison of our striving than step out into the vast, unmapped, and beautifully uncertain wilderness of the present moment. We are caught in a self-destructive loop. The more anxious we feel about the uncertainty of life, the harder we work to build our future sanctuary. But the very act of working for a distant safety reinforces the terrifying illusion that we are unsafe right now, right here, in the only moment we will ever actually possess. Take a single moment to observe what happens within your physical structure when we simply give a name to this condition. Is there a subtle, almost imperceptible softening in your lower belly, a tiny dropping of the shoulder blades away from the ears? Even the small intellectual recognition of our shared entrapment allows a microscopic crack to appear in our defensive armor. We begin to see that we are all walking through the same modern wilderness, sharing the same profound homesickness for our own lives. We are all standing on the edge of an immense, beautiful ocean of immediate sensory experience. Yet we are too preoccupied with checking our instruments and reinforcing our docks to ever dip our feet into the water. We are terrified that if we drop our plans, if we stop constructing our future sanctuary, we will dissolve into nothingness. We are afraid that without our achievements and our goals, we will have no identity, no value, and no place in this world. The invitation of our transformation is not to abandon our intellect, to destroy our careers, or to live without intelligent preparation for the practical realities of our lives. The invitation is to fundamentally alter our relationship to the sanctuary we are building. It is to see that the milestone is a concept, the financial number is an abstraction, and the future palace is a phantom of the mind. The only genuine sanctuary that has ever existed, or will ever exist, is the raw, unadorned texture of the current breath moving through your nostrils. The sanctuary is the exact temperature of your hands in this moment. It is the precise, unrepeatable quality of this room, with all its imperfections, its mechanical sounds, and its quiet, ordinary miracles. We must learn how to slip our awareness down from the hot, crowded offices of our analytical thoughts and allow it to settle into the wide, quiet landscape of our physical bodies. We must learn how to meet the world, not as a transaction to be optimized, but as an intimate, living presence that is ready to receive us the moment we choose to arrive. Look at the light shifting against the glass walls around you. Listen to the small, mundane acoustics of your immediate environment, the low hum of the computer fan, the distant murmur of traffic outside the glass, the quiet rustle of your own clothing against your skin. These are not background noises that we must ignore until our life begins. These are our life. Every time we pull our awareness back from a projected future and ground it firmly in these simple physical truths, we are performing a radical act of liberation. We are reclaiming our right to be whole, our right to be here, our right to rest in the only piece of time that actually belongs to our biology. We are beginning the slow, patient process of dismantling the architect of postponement within, stepping out of the psychological waiting room and discovering that the ground we are standing on is already completely solid, and already completely safe, and already completely enough. To comprehend the precise mechanics of this self-imposed exile, we must dissect the internal landscape of the archetype who rules over our modern ambition. Let us examine this part of ourselves, this hyper-efficient strategist who functions as the architect of the postponed sanctuary. This aspect of our identity operates with a brilliant, calculating intensity that dominates our waking hours. It is the voice within us that treats life not as an organic river to be navigated, but as a series of structural engineering problems to be resolved through sheer force of intellect. This character is highly visible in our culture, wearing the clothes of the polished executive, the visionary entrepreneur, the meticulous planner, or the dedicated striver, whose life is an aesthetic monument to forward momentum. From the outside, this person is a paragon of absolute control, the reliable pillar who has mapped out the next 5 years with mathematical precision, whose calendar is an optimized grid of productive outputs, and whose financial ledger is continuously audited to guarantee future security. But if we pull back the beautifully rendered blueprints of this persona and look into the basement of their psychology, we find a structural foundation built entirely upon a profound, unremitting panic. This chronic psychological state does not remain confined to our thoughts. It deforms the very anatomy of our physical body, carving deep lines of tension into our muscles and connective tissues. The human body is a highly responsive field of liquid intelligence, designed to constantly adapt its cellular tension to signals of safety or emergency. When our awareness resides permanently in a future milestone, our biology behaves as though it is under an endless siege. Let us map the precise somatic architecture of this postponed existence, tracing the physical geometry of the hyperstriving mind. We begin at the upper perimeter of the chest, where the intercostal musculus, the thin bands of tissue that weave between our ribs, are locked in a permanent, tight constriction. This is the structural breastplate of the modern achiever. By pulling the ribs tightly together, we create a rigid cage around the heart and the lungs. This muscular compression restricts the lateral and posterior movement of the rib cage, forcing our respiration to stay shallow, rapid, and confined entirely to the upper clavicular region. We are literally holding our hearts hostage behind an iron lattice of self-preservation, refusing to let the chest soften because we believe that vulnerability is a structural defect that will cause our entire life to collapse. This rigidity travels downward, establishing a profound defensive freeze within the deep walls of the lower abdomen. If we scan our bellies right now, we will likely find that the abdominal wall is pulled inward and held hard against the spine, or that the muscles surrounding our navel are guarded and unresponsive. This is the somatic signature of a life lived on credit. The architect within us cannot allow the belly to expand because a soft belly signifies an undefended presence. A soft belly requires us to drop our weapons, to stop calculating, and to occupy the immediate space we are in without a strategic justification. By keeping the abdomen perpetually hard, we block the downward descent of the diaphragm. When the diaphragm cannot fully drop with each inhalation, the lower lobes of the lungs remain uninflated, depriving our nervous system of the vital stimulation of the vagus nerve. We remain trapped in a self-perpetuating cycle of biological emergency, our organs starved of the chemical signals of rest and repair, because our body believes that we are still running across a burning desert toward a distant oasis of safety. This systemic brake drops even lower, compressing the cervical spine and locking the heavy structures of our neck and shoulder girdle into a pattern of chronic exhaustion. The trapezius and levator scapulae muscles are drawn upward toward our ears, behaving as though they are physically holding up the massive stone blocks of the future palace we are trying to build. We walk through our office buildings and our city streets, carrying an invisible, crushing weight on our shoulders. The weight of our projected retirement, the weight of our reputation, the weight of our children's future security, and the weight of our own conditional self-worth. We sit at our desks for hours, doing nothing more than clicking plastic buttons and looking at light-emitting diodes. Yet we leave the building at dusk feeling as though our spinal columns have been compressed by an immense hydraulic press. Our bones are tired because they are trying to structurally support a timeline that exists only as an electrical simulation within our prefrontal cortex. Why do we choose to inhabit our physical bodies with such defensive ferocity? We do it because the psychological payoff of the ever-receding milestone is incredibly seductive to the human ego. The mind experiences a powerful, intoxicating hit of validation whenever it moves closer to its chosen condition for happiness. When we achieve a specific title, sign a lucrative contract, or watch the numbers on our digital dashboards increase, the architect within us feels a momentary surge of omnipotence. For a brief window of time, we tell ourselves that we have successfully outsmarted the inherent fragility of life. We believe we have bought ourselves a few square inches of solid ground in an unstable universe. But this temporary relief is a drug that carries a devastating tolerance level. Within days or even hours of reaching our long-sought milestone, the old familiar undercurrent of dread returns. The ground begins to feel shaky again. The inner tyrant whispers that our current achievement is already obsolete, that the market has changed, that inflation has eroded our security, or that someone else has climbed higher than we have. The sanctuary we thought we had finally reached dissolves into mist, and the architect immediately draws a new blueprint, projecting our safety into an even more distant, more expensive future. This addiction to future building creates a tragic, inverted relationship with our own existence. We transform our precious human vitality into a mere tool for production, turning ourselves into transactional accountants who refuse to experience life until the accounts are perfectly balanced. Consider the profound emotional poverty of this condition. We live in a permanent state of spiritual austerity, withholding joy, intimacy, and rest from our own flesh under the illusion that we are practicing discipline. When a moment of spontaneous beauty presents itself, a golden slant of afternoon light hitting the floorboards, a sudden burst of laughter with an old friend, or a quiet wave of unprovoked peace, while walking through the rain, the architect steps in to audit the experience. It tells us that we do not have time for this, that we have not earned the right to idle, or that our attention should be focused on the next deadline. We pull ourselves out of the warmth of the direct perception and retreat into the cold office of our strategic thoughts, believing that our happiness is an item that must be purchased at the end of our career, rather than a natural current that flows through the present moment. This habit of postponement wreaks absolute havoc upon our relationships, rendering us emotionally illiterate and functionally unavailable to the people we share our lives with. When we treat our days as a transaction to be optimized for a future sanctuary, we cease to see the people around us as mysterious, living worlds. We reduce them to resources, obstacles, or liabilities within our grand design. We look at our partners, our children, and our friends through the narrow lens of our expectations, demanding that they behave in a way that aligns with our timeline for security. If a partner expresses an unexpected emotional need that disrupts our schedule, or if a child moves at the slow, organic pace of childhood rather than the high-velocity speed of our careerism, we meet their presence with an immediate, sharp irritation. We treat their fluid, unoptimized humanity as a threat to our architectural plans. We tell ourselves that we are working this hard for them, that we are sacrificing our current presence to build a safe future for our family. But this is the ultimate lie of the postponed self. We are giving them our money, our property, and our status, but we are withholding the only currency that has any true value in the kingdom of love, the spacious, quiet, and fully embodied warmth of our undivided attention. This creates a deep, cellular loneliness that echoes through the modern Western psyche. We are more connected, more documented, and more secured than any generation in human history, yet we feel a quiet, pervasive sense of abandonment. We feel empty because we have abandoned ourselves to a ghost, We have left the living temple of our immediate sensations to live inside an abstract world of symbols, numbers, and conceptual definitions. And because we are never truly here, because we are always leaning forward into the next hour, we can never experience the profound, healing reassurance of being met by life. We are like a person who has spent decades building an immaculate, bulletproof glass house to protect themselves from the weather, only to realize that the glass is so thick that the warmth of the sun can never touch their skin, and the voice of anyone trying to love them is reduced to a distant, unintelligible murmur. We must sit with the sheer, unmedicated tragedy of this conditioning. We have turned our short, beautiful lifespan into a perpetual dress rehearsal for a play that never actually opens. We spend the first third of our lives acquiring the credentials and the language required to enter the market. We spend the second third straining every nerve and starving our lungs to build the material perimeter of our sanctuary. And we spend the final third trying to heal the broken, exhausted bodies that we destroyed during the construction process. We are always getting ready to live, always waiting for the perfect alignment of external conditions, the right bank balance, the right political climate, the right relationship status, the right physical health, before we allow ourselves to step onto the stage of our own existence. But the biological clock does not pause for our calculations. The cells are aging, the hair is graying, and the finite number of heartbeats allocated to our organism is steadily trickling away into the dark. We die with our magnificent, unused blueprints clutched tightly in our cold white hands, having never spoken a single spontaneous line from the depth of our authentic, unadorned being. Look at the collective symptoms of this modern malady. It is visible in the structural collapse of our mental health, in the epidemic of chronic fatigue that strikes professionals in the prime of their careers, and in the pervasive reliance on chemical interventions to force our nervous systems into an artificial simulation of rest. We have built an entire civilization that functions as a high-velocity machine for the postponement of life. We view stillness as a criminal waste of economic potential, and we treat the individual who is content with what is right here as a broken component that needs to be retrained or replaced. We are experts at building empires, optimizing workflows, and safeguarding legacies, but we are terrified novices when it comes to the simple radical act of sitting still in an unfortified room and letting the current moment be exactly as it is. Every time we catch our minds drifting into the familiar mathematics of our future security, every time we feel our bodies leaning forward toward the next task on our infinite checklist, we are witnessing the automatic execution of this evolutionary survival software. This software was not designed to make us happy. It was not designed to make us peaceful or wise or capable of deep love. Its only job is to keep us physically alive by predicting danger, hoarding resources, and eliminating the vulnerability of the unknown. It is a primitive, binary system that treats the spacious freedom of the present moment as an unsafe void that must be immediately paved over with concrete plans. But we are not the software. We are the vast, silent, and conscious space in which the software runs. We are the living, breathing human being who has the sovereign capacity to look up from the screen of our calculations, to feel the tight, suffocating armor of our physical tissues, and to make the radical, disruptive decision to drop our tools, step out of the blueprint, and claim our sanctuary right here, right now, in the middle of the unmapped wilderness of the current breath. Let us allow the weight of this realization to settle deep into our bones. Feel the literal texture of your posture as you receive these words. Notice the areas where your armor has hardened into a physical boundary, the compression in your lower back, the tightness in your diaphragm, the clenching in your gluteal muscles. Do not try to fix these things. Do not try to optimize your posture using a new therapeutic technique. for that would simply be the architect trying to build a better fortress. Instead, simply allow yourself to feel the intense, historical exhaustion of your own defense mechanisms. Let your awareness hold the tiredness of a body that has spent years trying to carry a tomorrow that does not exist. In that simple, naked witnessing, free of judgment or the need for correction, the first fracture begins to appear in the concrete of our minds. We are no longer the frantic builder, we are the spacious consciousness that is observing the builder with immense compassion, stepping off the treadmill of perpetual postponement and returning home to the only ground that has ever been solid. To pierce the thick canopy of our modern striving and find the source of our liberation, we must apply a sharp, ancient surgical instrument to the anatomy of our suffering. When we strip away our contemporary terminology and look into the raw mechanics of the human mind, we discover that our chronic habit of postponement is driven by a primitive, double-layered structure of psychological trauma. In the core analysis of our existential condition, life delivers to us a continuous, unpredictable stream of primary events. These events constitute the first arrow of existence. The first arrow is the inherent groundlessness of being a biological organism in a changing universe. It is the sudden fluctuation of the economic market that wipes out a decade of savings. It is the unexpected diagnosis that alters our physical capacities overnight. It is the natural, inevitable aging of our joints, the loss of our parents, or the sudden cold realization that a professional path we spent 15 years constructing no longer holds any meaning for us. These events are sharp, heavy, and undeniably painful. They slice through our curated comfort without our permission, striking our flesh with the raw, uncaring force of natural law. But our true agony, the deep, suffocating desperation that locks our diaphragms and turns our nights into a sleepless landscape of dread, does not come from this first arrow. It comes from the way our mind responds to the wound. The moment the first arrow lands, the architect of the postponed sanctuary panics. It looks at the blood on its hands, screams that its perimeter has been breached, and immediately fires a furious, blinding volley of secondary projectiles into its own tissues. This is the second arrow, the arrow of our cognitive reactivity. When a financial setback occurs, the first arrow causes a legitimate, localized sting of practical concern. But the second arrow is the mind weaving an elaborate, terrifying horror story out of that sting. The second arrow is the voice that says, "This means you will end up destitute. This proves you are fundamentally incompetent. You will lose everything you have built, your peers will look down on you, and you will die alone in an unheated room because you failed to protect yourself." Consider the profound, self-inflicted violence of this second arrow. We believe that by obsessively calculating our recovery, by building higher walls of future security, and by refusing to rest until our numbers are restored, we are performing an act of intelligent self-defense. In reality, we are taking a single, manageable wound and multiplying it 1,000-fold through the power of our imagination. The first arrow is an event that occurs in linear time. It has a beginning, a duration, and an end. It strikes, it hurts, and then it passes into the history of the cosmos. But the second arrow has no expiration date. Because it is manufactured entirely within our own cognitive processing, it can be relived 10,000 times a day. We can suffer a single professional criticism or a minor relational shift for 5 consecutive years, rehearsing the humiliation every morning while brush our teeth, every afternoon while sitting in traffic, and every night while staring at the ceiling. We are no longer bleeding from the wounds inflicted by the world, we are bleeding from the sharp precision scalpels of our own endless planning. Let us shine a bright, unyielding light onto the foundational delusion that keeps this machine of self-torture running, the myth of a permanent, stable ego identity that must be fortified at all costs. This is the ultimate blueprint that the architect within us is trying to actualize. We spend our lives under the deep, visceral assumption that there is a solid, unchanging entity called me sitting somewhere inside our skulls, a permanent captain who owns our career, owns our body, owns our bank accounts, and must be safely steered across a hostile ocean toward a harbor of absolute security. We treat this egoid entity like a fragile, precious monument made of raw salt. We believe that if we can just build a magnificent, weatherproof palace around this monument, paving over our vulnerabilities with achievements, material property and social titles, it will stand forever, untouched by the chaotic decay of time. We want to become a fixed, definitive noun, a finished product that is finally safe from the fluid unpredictability of existence. But when we apply the sharp blade of direct observation to our actual moment-to-moment experience, this permanent self dissolves like a mirage under a hot sun. It is a psychological fiction, a linguistic convenience that we have mistaken for a physical substance. If we look closely at our internal universe in this exact moment, what do we actually find? We do not find a solid, static monument. We find an unceasing, ever-shifting river of experiences. We find a temporary constellation of thoughts passing through the mind, a fleeting wave of physical warmth or tightness, a sudden sound entering the ear from the street outside, and the raw, cool texture of the current inhalation moving across the back of our throat. There is no central manager sitting behind our eyes. There is only the ongoing dynamic process of experiencing itself. We are not a static noun, we are a fluid, unfolding verb. We are a living, breathing happening, as unmappable and ungraspable as a wind pattern over a mountain lake or a shifting shadow across a forest floor. The misery of the architect stems entirely from this refusal to match the fluid nature of reality. We are trying to force a liquid universe into rigid geometric boxes of our own making. We demand that our career paths be a perfectly linear, ascending line on a corporate graph. We demand that our relationships remain a permanently stable, conflict-free harbor. We demand that our physical bodies remain forever youthful, efficient, and free of degradation. When reality behaves according to its own organic laws, when it twists, turns, decays, and surprises, we experience this natural movement as a personal betrayal, a cosmic error that threatens our very survival. But nothing has actually gone wrong with the universe. The only thing that has broken is our map. The only thing that has collapsed is our arrogant, exhausting illusion that we could freeze the flowing river of life into a static, manageable block of ice. Look at the extraordinary, breathless liberation that opens up within our hearts when we finally see through this illusion of the fixed self. If there is no permanent, unchanging identity to defend, then who is the one who is being threatened by the uncertainty of tomorrow? Who is the one who will be obliterated if a project fails, if a financial ledger drops, or if a title is stripped away? The phantom fear begins to lose its grip upon our throat. We realize that the ego we have been spending all our vital life force protecting is nothing more than a shadow cast by our own defensive thoughts. We are like a person who has exhausted their health, ruined their relationships, and starved their lungs to install an expensive, military-grade security system around a house that is completely empty. We are tensing our muscles and living in a state of perpetual biological panic to defend a ghost. Let us pause here, allowing the sheer, clean weight of this truth to drop through the layers of our intellectual defense. The relief of this realization is an immense physical loosening of an ancient knot deep within our chests. When we drop the exhausting burden of needing to maintain a permanent, flawless identity, we step out of the isolated prison of the ego and into the wide, vibrant landscape of radical interconnection. We see that our anxiety is not a unique, shameful defect that we alone possess. It is the universal human friction that arises whenever a mind tries to cling to that which is inherently ungraspable. This brings us to the core mechanism of our self-imprisonment, the phenomenon of deep, muscular ding-mak, the tight, possessive grasping of the mind that refuses to let reality be as it is. This dingmak is not an abstract concept. It is a physical, energetic contraction that can be felt within our sensory apparatus. It is the immediate clench that happens in our throat, our jaw, and our stomach whenever we experience a moment of professional validation and try to freeze it into a permanent reputation, or whenever we encounter a moment of financial vulnerability and immediately try to push it away. We are like a child, trying to grab a handful of water from a rushing mountain stream. The tighter we squeeze our fist to possess the water, the faster it escapes through our clenched fingers, leaving our hand empty, cold and severely cramped. The architect's mind is in a state of chronic structural cramping, its knuckles white from trying to grip the fluid currents of time, worth and security. We tell ourselves that our grasping is a form of strength, a proof of our excellence, our high standards, and our competitive resilience. We convince ourselves that if we loosen our grip on our future milestones, if we stop demanding that our lives conform to our blueprints, we will lose our edge, we will become lazy, and our existence will drift into mediocrity. But this is the supreme lie of our conditioning that keeps the wheel of burnout turning forever. True strength is never the brittle rigidity of a dry oak branch that snaps in the first winter gale. True strength is the supple, yielding flexibility of the green bamboo that bends completely with the storm, molding itself to the fury of the wind, and returns effortlessly to its upright center once the sky has cleared. When we cling desperately to our conditions for happiness, we become incredibly brittle. We become hyperreactive to any deviation from our script. A minor delay in a flight, a sudden shift in a digital metric, or a casual, unoptimized comment from a colleague can cause a total emotional collapse or a volcanic explosion of rage. Our world becomes suffocatingly narrow, confined entirely to the fragile perimeter of our expectations. The timeless wisdom of direct awareness offers us a completely different way of meeting the storm of life, not through the closed fist of grasping, but through the wide open palm of non-attachment. Non-attachment does not mean cold, heartless indifference. It does not mean that we abandon our work, neglect our families, or sit in passive compliance while our lives fall into ruin. To live with an open hand means that we care deeply, we engage fully, we design our projects with the highest level of intelligence, but we do not require the world to validate our existence before we allow ourselves to feel whole. We offer our finest efforts to the present moment. We cast our seeds into the dark soil of reality, and then we have the humility and the courage to step back and allow the universe to determine the timing of the harvest. We understand that we have absolute sovereignty over our actions, but we have absolutely zero sovereignty over the fruits of those actions. Imagine the profound, velvety psychological space that opens up within your life when this shift occurs. When we stop demanding that tomorrow look exactly like our blueprint, the unknown transforms from a terrifying source of dread into a vast, luminous ocean of infinite possibility. We no longer look at the unmapped spaces of our careers or our lives with eyes of panic. We look at them with the receptive curiosity of an explorer who understands that the most breathtaking landscapes are always found on the trails that do not appear on the map. We become capable of meeting whatever arises with a fluid, spontaneous, and unscripted intelligence. If a financial storm comes, we find shelter if a path is blocked by an unexpected crisis. We pivot without drama if we fall into a valley of failure. We rest upon the earth until our energy returns. We are no longer trying to outsmart or outmaneuver life. We are learning how to dance with it. Let us return into the physical container of our bodies to see how this philosophical dissection translates directly into our flesh. As we sit here noticing the soft, rhythmic rise and fall of the breath, can we see the absolute truth of impermanence operating within our own lungs? Every single inhalation is a birth, a gathering of energy, a temporary fullness that cannot be hoarded. If we try to hold on to the inhalation, if we refuse to let it go, because we like the feeling of full lungs, or because we are afraid of emptiness, the air quickly turns toxic within our bloodstream. Starving our tissues of oxygen, we are forced to surrender it, and every single exhalation is a radical letting go, a beautiful death, an absolute abdication of control that empties us completely. The body does not panic when it empties. It does not worry whether the next breath will arrive, or whether it has earned the right to breathe again. It rests for a timeless microsecond in the spacious void of the exhalation, trusting completely in the natural, self-regulating laws of biology that will bring the next inhalation when the time is right. This is the organic cadence we have forgotten. We are trying to live our lives in a permanent state of inhaled suspension, always accumulating, always fortifying, always preparing, always holding our breath until the next milestone is reached. We are terrified of the empty, unoptimized space between the breaths, the quiet pause where nothing is being produced, nothing is being audited, and nothing is guaranteed. But it is precisely within that pause, within that spacious gap between our thoughts and our plans, where our true sanctuary resides. It is the unmoving axis around which the entire chaotic wheel of the world turns. When we learn how to inhabit that gap, how to drop our anchors into the deep stillness of the immediate present, the architect of postponement dissolves like a shadow when a room is flooded with light. We are finally, truly, unshakably home, to transition from the clear, surgical deconstruction of our chronic postponement into the actual medicine of immediate transformation. We must examine the nature of our mental constructs through a specific, elemental image. Let us consider the unturned soil that sits buried deep beneath the pavement of our modern existence. Imagine an ancient, dark, and incredibly fertile earth, rich with nutrients, moisture, and the dormant seeds of wild blossoms. This earth is our natural, unvarnished capacity for immediate joy, sufficiency, and somatic peace. It is the wild terrain of our true nature. But as we grew up and entered the high-velocity matrix of achievement culture, the architect within us deemed this raw, muddy earth too unstable, too unpredictable, and too vulnerable to be trusted. And so, year after year, deadline after deadline, we began to pour layer upon layer of grey, dense, and unyielding concrete over our internal soil. This concrete is our strategic logic, our 5-year plans, our carefully calculated metrics of self-worth, and our rigid conditions for happiness. We have paved over our living tissue with the smooth asphalt of efficiency, proud of how flat and manageable our psychological surface has become. We walk across this internal pavement every single day, wondering why we feel so disconnected, so brittle, and so profoundly starved for a sense of deep vitality. We look out at the horizon of our milestones, believing that if we can just lay down 10 more miles of asphalt, if we can just pave our way to the next financial or professional breakthrough, we will finally find a park, a sanctuary, a place where grass is allowed to grow. But the sanctuary is not at the end of the road. The practice of mental training is not about engineering a more beautiful, polished highway toward a distant peace. It is the radical, immediate decision to stop pouring the concrete altogether. It is the willingness to let the heavy machinery of your intellect grind to a complete halt, allowing the unyielding pavement of your strategic thinking to crack, split, and fracture under the pressure of your direct perception. It is the realization that the living, dark earth of your sufficiency has never been destroyed. It has merely been waiting, in perfect silence, directly beneath the thick asphalt of your strivings. This reclamation of our internal soil requires a systematic, deeply embodied retraining of our attention, a process that moves step by step through the layers of our biology to reverse our lifetime of psychological postponement. The first pillar of this practice is the deep structural unclamping of our pelvic ballast. When we live inside the architect's blueprint, Our awareness is completely congested within the upper third of our frame, locked in a hyperactive circuit behind our eyes and within the muscles of our throat. We are top-heavy, completely detached from our roots, balancing precariously on the tips of our toes like a tree whose root system has been severed from the earth. To break this spell, we must consciously lower the center of gravity within our physical form, allowing our attention to slide down the elevator of the spine until it pools heavily at the base of the torso. Let us practice this downward migration right now, in this exact posture, without changing a single external detail of your environment. Take your attention completely away from the intellectual meaning of these concepts and direct it straight down into the heavy bowl of your pelvis. Let the deep muscles of your gluteal region, your hip sockets, and your lower pelvic floor entirely surrender their tension into the support of whatever surface is holding you. Imagine that your pelvic basin is a massive stone chalice, sinking deeper and deeper into the earth with every passing second, dropping its center of gravity far beneath the floorboards of this skyscraper. Let the weight of your genitals, your lower intestines, and your inner thighs drop completely downward, abdicating the muscular effort it takes to keep your body poised for a future flight. As the pelvis anchors itself into this heavy primordial gravity, allow your awareness to extend down through the thighs, into the shins, and settle firmly within the soles of your feet. Feel the direct, unfiltered contact between the leather or fabric of your shoes and the solid ground beneath you. Notice the intricate map of physical feedback available to you right now. The cool circulating around your ankles, the subtle pressure radiating across your heels, and the tiny, automatic micro-movements your toes are making to balance your frame. Do not think about your feet. Do not visualize them from the outside like an observer. Inhabit them from the inside out, feeling them as a living, breathing field of raw, tingling and unoptimized energy. When your center of gravity rests firmly at the base of your structure, the frantic velocity of your prefrontal cortex loses its power to pull you forward. The thoughts may continue to spin their complex web of future emergencies, but you are no longer caught in the web. You are the heavy spider sitting quietly at the center of the wheel, rooted, immovable, and perfectly safe. From this grounded, lower baseline, we can open the second pillar of our training, which is the practice of welcoming the hidden spring. This is a deliberate, somatic alteration of our breathing pattern designed to shatter the rigid holding pattern of the intercostal muscles and release the tight guard around our abdominal wall. The architect's breath is an earned currency. We breathe shallowly because we feel we must work to deserve the space we occupy. To heal this wound, we must learn how to receive each breath not as an incentive for labor, but as an immediate, unconditional downpour of absolute nourishment that requires zero justification. As you allow the next inhalation to arrive, make the conscious decision to let your lower abdominal wall completely soften outward. Let your belly become round, soft, and undefended, like the belly of a sleeping infant or a creature in the wild that knows it is entirely safe from predators. Let the breath travel past your collarbones, pass straight through the tight cage of your ribs, and drop all the way down into the dark cavern of your pelvic bowl. Feel the gentle liquid expansion of your lower back and kidneys as the air fills the lowest lobes of your lungs. Then, as the breath turns to leave the body, open your mouth just a fraction of an inch, unhinging the massive masseter muscles of your jaw completely. Let your tongue drop heavily away from the palate, resting like a damp stone behind your lower teeth. Let the exhalation be a slow, passive sigh of relief, a complete letting go of the reins. Do not push the air out with your abdominal muscles. Simply allow the natural, elastic recoil of your lungs to empty your torso. With every millimeter of air that leaves your lips, imagine that you are consciously scraping a layer of concrete off your internal soil. Let the exhalation wash away your financial projections. Let it carry out your 5-year career goals. Let it dissolve your need to appear competent to your peers. And let it completely empty you of your identity as a hyper-efficient professional. Let yourself empty down to the very bottom of the breath until there is absolutely nothing left to surrender. At that precise intersection, before your body commands the next breath to begin, you will find yourself standing in the unmapped pauser, timeless microsecond where your lungs are empty, your blueprints are gone, and your titles have been stripped away. Inhabit this gap with absolute intimacy. Notice that even when you have absolutely no plan for your tomorrow, even when you are completely ordinary and unoptimized, you are still fully alive, fully conscious, and completely whole. The world does not shatter because you stepped out of the driver's seat for a heartbeat. When the next inhalation arrives, receive it as a free, unmerited gift from the universe, an internal spring, bubbling up from an aquifer of sufficiency that you did not have to dig or pay for. The third pillar of this mental transformation involves cultivating the capacity for direct sensory perception over conceptual labeling. The architect's mind is a compulsive translator. It cannot look at a raw sensory detail without immediately stamping it with a linguistic label, an evaluation, or a place within a future strategy. If a siren wails in the street below, the mind labels it an interruption. If a sharp sensation flashes across the shoulder blades, it labels it a symptom of decay. If a project drops in value, it labels it a disaster. These labels are the grey bricks with which we construct the heavy, suffocating walls of our psychological waiting room. The practice of mindfulness is the precise discipline of slipping beneath the word to touch the raw, unpolished texture of the reality itself. When you sit at your desk, or when you move through the labyrinth of your daily routine, try to practice the art of acoustic spaciousness. Listen to the environment around you, not with an analytical mind that wants to identify, categorize, and master every sound, but with the receptive ear of an open valley. Let the sounds of the modern metropolis wash over your eardrums without your intellect needing to comment on them. The steady hum of the climate control unit, the rapid, percussive clicking of a keyboard, the distant rumble of the subway line vibrating through the steel pillars, the quiet murmur of voices in the next office, receive them all as a single complex and beautiful symphony of the present moment. None of these occurrences are distractions from your life. They are the direct manifestation of reality happening right now. When you drop the labels of pleasant and unpleasant, productive and counterproductive, the friction between your mind and the world dissolves into mist. You stop fighting the texture of the hour and begin to ride its waves like a skilled navigator. This exact same sensory intimacy must be directed toward your internal landscapes of discomfort. When the second arrow of anxiety strikes your flesh, when you feel that sudden, cold contraction tightening around your chest, or that heavy burning knot of dread forming in the pit of your stomach, do not attempt to think your way out of the sensation. Do not analyze why you are anxious. Do not review your financial buffers to soothe the panic, and do not blame your nervous system for being reactive. That would simply be the architect trying to lay down a more beautiful piece of pavement to cover up a crack. Instead, make the radical, disruptive decision to open the doors of your body and invite the discomfort to sit directly at the center of your awareness. Direct the laser of your attention straight into the physical epicenter of the tightness. Strip away the word anxiety entirely and ask yourself, what is this sensation made of when I look at it with raw biological curiosity? Look at it as an explorer mapping an uncharted cave. Is it a dense, heavy stone? Is it a hot, swirling current? Is it a sharp, electrical vibration? Does it have a clear perimeter, or does it bleed out into the surrounding tissues? As you hold the sensation in the vast, warm space of non-judgmental witnessing, you will discover a profound truth. The discomfort is not a solid object. It is not a permanent defect within your anatomy. It is a fluid, moving event. It throbs. It shifts its boundaries by a fraction of a millimeter. It changes its temperature from hot to cold, and it breathes with its own organic rhythm. By simply allowing the sensation to be exactly as it is, by refusing to fire the second arrow of mental resistance or future remedy into it, the heavy armor of your body begins to melt. The frozen energy of the emotion is allowed to liquefy and complete its natural life cycle, passing through your nervous system like a brief summer cloudburst over an open field, leaving the atmosphere behind it, clear, cool, and incredibly spacious. This brings us to the ultimate integration of our training. Learning how to construct our lives, build our businesses, and navigate our practical responsibilities from a baseline of inherent sufficiency rather than a state of delayed worthiness. We do not need to burn our calendars, resign from our positions, or adopt a life of passive isolation to touch the sanctuary of the Buddha's path. The transformation occurs not in what we are building, but in how our hands hold the tools. We transition from the rigid, fear-driven architecture of the blueprint to the fluid, intelligent responsiveness of the river. When you sit down to plan your week or organize your material assets, do so with an open palm. Write your schedules, map your trajectories, and design your creative projects with the highest level of sharp, professional intelligence available to your mind. But as you close your notebook or dim the screen of your computer, whisper a silent phrase of structural surrender to your own spirit. This is a beautiful map, but I leave the architecture of tomorrow entirely to the unturned soil. Understand that your plan is merely a playful hypothesis, a flexible guess about how reality might flow, not a rigid demand that the universe must fulfill to purchase your right to exist. When the unexpected occurs, when a market correction collapses a timeline, when a key relational connection dissolves overnight, or when your physical frame suffers an unexpected limitation, the trained mind does not experience a catastrophic breakage. It bends with the liquid grace of water, meeting a boulder in its path. It instantly recognizes that the old map no longer corresponds to the actual territory, drops the obsolete blueprint without a single microsecond of self-pity or internal litigation, and immediately begins to feel the raw, authentic contours of the new landscape with curiosity, clarity, and presence. We become capable of working with an extraordinary, unblocked efficiency that outshines the frantic velocity of the hyper-striving mind. The architect wastes an immense percentage of its vital fuel running simulations of disasters that never happen, fighting ghosts that have no substance, and protecting a self-importance that does not exist. The present mind, however, conserves its energy with beautiful discipline. It remains perfectly still, centered, and deeply grounded until the exact moment of action arrives. And when that moment strikes, it meets reality with its full, concentrated weight, acting with the clean, effortless precision of natural law. Let us sit with the absolute accessibility of this path. It does not require you to travel to a distant land, to adopt an exotic vocabulary, or to wait for a future retirement to claim your freedom. It requires you only to be honest with your current anatomy, to be intimate with the breath that is currently passing across your lips, and to have the courage to fracture the concrete of your own intellectual control. Every time you notice your shoulders creeping up toward your ears in a posture of anticipation, every time you catch your belly hardening against the space you occupy, simply remember the dark, unturned soil that sits waiting beneath your pavement. Smile at the automatic operation of your ancient survival software. Take one deep, unearned breath into the lower abdomen and let your awareness drop down into the soles of your feet. Step off the exhausting treadmill of the postponed sanctuary. Let your rigid perimeters melt into the vast, fluid stream of existence, and discover the radical, unshakable peace that has been waiting for you all along, right here. beneath the unmapped sky of this very moment. When the grey, unyielding pavement of our chronic postponement finally splits apart and dissolves back into the dark earth, we do not tumble into a void of failure. We do not lose our capacity to build, to create, or to intelligently navigate the material demands of our modern landscape. Instead, we step directly into the sovereign sufficiency of the integrated voida profound, cell-level state of consciousness where our worth is no longer a debt to be paid at the end of a career, but an unshakable, self-radiant fact of our immediate existence. The mind becomes like an ancient, deep millpond tucked away in a quiet forest. The surface of the pond does not run after the wind, begging it to blow, nor does it grasp at the autumn leaves that float across its mirror-like face. It simply rests in its own liquid density, allowing the silt of confusion to settle naturally to the bottom. Reflecting the vastness of the sky and the sharp reality of the passing clouds, with an effortless, unstained clarity, it remains completely available to the world, intimately involved in every ripple of change, yet fundamentally free, spacious, and anchored in its own unmapped depth. This is the birth of true, unfortified peace. We are no longer living our lives in the conditional tense, waiting for an external milestone to grant us permission to inhabit our own skin. When we drop the heavy tools of the architect, our relationship with time undergoes a quiet, cataclysmic revolution. We see that the future is not a hostile fortress. We must storm through a sea of biological panic. It is an organic, effortless blossoming that happens by itself, one breath at a time. We stop treating our days as a series of structural liabilities to be mitigated or transactions to be audited. We allow our awareness to settle fully and heavily into the living temple of our flesh, discovering a deep physical stability that cannot be shaken by the shifting currents of public opinion or financial trends. The breath moves through our soft, undefended bellies like a warm subterranean tide, steady, ancient, and immensely wise, delivering the biological chemicals of absolute safety to every organ, every joint, and every muscle fiber. We are finally radiantly awake to the extraordinary, unadorned miracle of the ordinary now. We begin to look at the world with clean, unpaved eyes, stripped of the heavy filters of our strategies and the blinding, anxious glare of our constant forward momentum. We notice the intricate, heartbreaking beauty of the world. We have spent years outrunning the texture of the sunlight, cutting through the industrial smog at dusk, the specific micro-expressions of vulnerability on the face of a colleague, the cool density of the water we use to wash our hands, and the vast silent horizons that open up whenever our thoughts drop away. We meet the people we love not with a ledger of expectations, but with the wide, receptive palm of non-attachment, offering them a sanctuary that cannot be bought with corporate titles or material wealth, the spacious, quiet, and fully embodied warmth of our undivided attention. We have nothing left to hide behind, nothing left to hoard, and no fragile ego monument left to protect from the elements. We are no longer ghosts pre-living our lives inside a crowded mental workshop. We are human beings, rooted deep in the fertile soil of reality, alive, awake, and flowing with the unceasing current of existence. Let us carry with us the final luminous transmission left by the timeless observers of the human heart, a quiet truth that has survived the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations. The ultimate sanctuary has never been a structure built with human hands or secured by material numbers. There is no corporate promotion, no real estate perimeter, no financial buffer, and no ironclad strategy that can ever buy a single second of genuine freedom for an anxious soul. The refuge we have been engineering across 1,000 distant milestones has always been located right here, within the very awareness that is currently witnessing the rise and fall of your chest. We possess an inherent, invulnerable capacity to host both the storms of change and the sunshine of joy with equal warmth, fluid responsiveness, and an open, courageous heart. We are not fragile figures of salt waiting to be dissolved by the rain. We are the fertile, unturned earth that welcomes the water, ready to transform every unexpected drop of reality into an expression of immediate life. The flat neon glare of the office remains. The mathematical grids of the city lights continue to pulse outside the panoramic glass, and the unceasing rain of impermanence will keep falling across our careers and our lives, reshaping the world with a wild, beautiful indifference to our blueprints. The drawings we have spent our lifetimes editing are sitting cold and silent on the desk, completely empty of life force. The next hour is waiting to arrive, a completely unmapped wilderness, entirely unpredictable and overflowing with a mysterious, unconditioned freedom. The concrete of your mind has fractured into dust. The ground beneath your feet is open and dark, and the fresh, cool wind of the immediate present is rushing into your lungs, calling you by your true name. As you sit here in the spacious resonance of this ending, feeling the literal weight of your body anchoring itself to the earth and the soft, unearned spring of the breath moving through your soft belly, let the final question break open the illusion of your postponement. If you truly possessed the courage to realize that you have already arrived at your final milestone, what would you allow yourself to feel in the deep, unfortified sanctuary of this very moment?